Jody, would you like to get us started, please?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. It looks like we're still just a little bit early, but we'll go ahead and start kicking this off. My name is Judy Patterson. I'm the Director of Client Development for Oasis Solutions. Pam Scott, our Director of Client Services, is going to be presenting the webinar today. We look forward to showing you General Ledger, and encourage you, if you have any questions, to please enter those into the Q&A window. We may, if we have time, we'll try to answer those live during the presentation. Otherwise, we will follow up with you independently after the webinar to answer and address all of your questions. So we look forward to the demonstration today. Pam, take it away.
Thank you. And sorry if I started early. Everything on my end said 2 p.m. So thank you for that, Jody. Again, it does look like we're having people continuing to join the session. As Jody said, today we're going to talk about the General Ledger module. And I will try to answer questions that come up during the presentation, but due to some time constraints today, I may not be able to answer them live during this session. So again, please feel free to type in any of those questions, and they will be addressed after the presentation. Also, just to let you know that within a couple of days, each of you will receive an email with the recording of this webinar, and it also will be placed out on our website and our YouTube channel, so you can go out and watch it again at any time or share it with any of your team members. Please feel free to do that. And just one more thing, for whatever reason, I've had some issues with my calls dropping on Zoom sessions. So if my call drops, Jody will jump in and entertain you guys, and I will call right back. So I'll apologize up front should that happen. So today what we're going to talk about is we're going to be talking about various things in the General Ledger and kind of highlighting some of the areas where we get a lot of questions to our help desk, or things that clients during implementations or upgrades, they're wanting some additional information about. So what we're going to start off with in General Ledger is we're going to start talking about some of the setup options. So I'm going to go into the General Ledger options and just kind of show you a couple of things that are set up in here. Now, obviously, with your user maintenance and your role maintenance, you probably have it locked down pretty tightly. Who can even get into the General Ledger, what they can see, but you also want to limit who can get in to change any options or actually to get into anything within the setup. So you might want to take a look at who has access to that and make sure that the proper people have access to the General Ledger module. So on the main tab, if you look down on the left, you have GL Account Audit, and it says Account Changes to Track. And you have none, you have all, you have deletions, additions, and changes. What this is saying is anytime there is a change made to a GL account, it could be that you're adding a new GL account, it could be that you're deleting a GL account, you're adding a new GL account. This wants to know if you want to track those changes where you can actually then see that on an audit report. I'm kind of a firm believer that anywhere you can track history and have an audit trail, you should do so. So what I would set this is I would just set it to all. That way it's going to track any changes that occur to your General Ledger. And let's say that you accidentally merge a bunch of GL accounts into one and you're trying to figure out what did I merge and I didn't mean to do that. You can run this report and make that determination. And also, I believe if you are taking the time to track those changes, you should track those changes in detail. Again, you can turn this on or off at any point, but it only starts tracking it from the time you have set this up. The next field, this is where your retained earnings account is identified. So once you have your chart of account set up, you want to make sure that you put in your retained earnings account in the setup. On the right side of the screen in the middle, it has your current fiscal year and your current period. So for demo purposes today, my demo data is in the year 2025. So you will be seeing that date a lot. Under miscellaneous, you have the number of years to retain your GL history, and the minimum number you can go to is 2, and you can take it up to 99 years. And I believe most people keep it at a minimum of 7 years for audit purposes, but it's ever how long you want to keep that history. And what purges this history is when you do period end and year end processing. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation, but that's what triggers it to start removing history. And then you also have integrate with bank reconciliation. And we're going to talk about in just a little bit how you can get entries in your GL that also hit your bank rec. There's a way to do it. And so you're not having to make 2 entries. You don't have to do a general journal entry and then turn around and do that same entry in the bank reconciliation. If you use the transaction journal feature, which again we're going to take a look at, that integrates with bank rec, and so you're not having to make entries twice. So if you do have a business that, you know, maybe you have industry specific software that does your billing, but you want to record your cash receipts in the general ledger and have it integrate with bank rec, then you can use that transaction journal entry. The terminology tab, this is where it gives your default descriptions. So this is kind of the default description, but then if you want to call your asset account something else, you can do so. But this, the right column is user defined, where you can set up those individual descriptions. And then on the entry tab, I'm going to move back for just a second. A couple of things that you can do is if you want to do batch processing, you can do batch processing in the general journal entry and the transaction journal entry. So if you have a very large department and you have multiple people that are doing journal entries, you can set up batch entries so that each individual can create their own batch, review the details of their particular batch before they update, and then update and not affect anyone else. So you do have batch entry available on those 2 items. And then on the source journals, you know how when you do a general journal entry or transaction entry and you hit the little pound sign so that it assigns the next journal number, the next journal or number or register number, you can have those numbers reset at year end, at period end, or never reset. If you do it at period end, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure if this happens much in the newer versions, but I know that it happened in the prior versions, that if you were setting it at period end and then you were, you know, you're going through and you're doing entries, you might get an error message that says that that journal or register number already exists. And then we have to do a little work around that. And then also you can say whether or not you want it to track deleted journals. So that's just kind of a little bit about the setup in the General Ledger module. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that. And we're going to move away from the setup for just a second. And we're going to go back to our main tab. And this is where I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the transaction journal entry. And this transaction journal entry is what updates and integrates with the bank rec module. So if you have a habit of doing general journal entry, that does not integrate with bank rec. And if you're doing something that is related to a cash disbursement, a bank transfer, or a cash receipt, if you're doing those in General Journal Entry and you're using the bank reconciliation module in Sage 100, then you're basically going to have to be doing 2 entries. You're doing the GJ entry, and then you're going into bank rec and basically duplicating that entry. So to have this all happen within 1 entry, you can do a transaction journal entry. So when you do a transaction journal entry, excuse me, you can pick your source journal. And if it is let's just say that it's a cash receipt is the source journal that we're using. Let me just show you what populates. Now, obviously, this offset account is not correct, but what it's doing is it is showing you what the offset account of this entry is and what the bank code is. If I want to just do one, I'll just do a JE source journal. Whoop, that one is set up too. We'll just do one called PS. Is this a new source journal? Yes. And it wants to know if I want to copy it from something. If I don't, I'm just going to cancel that. I'm going to give it OK. Bear with me. When you're setting one up from scratch, what I was attempting to show you, which worked earlier today, when you set up a new source journal in this transaction journal entry, all of this offset information, the bank code, whether the offset is a debit or credit, all of that is going to be blank. And you're not going to be able to go in and populate these fields from this screen. But if you go into the Format button, this is where that field is formatted, and you could make the changes to that. So again, if you're creating one from scratch, you're going to be able to fill out this top part, but this offset, you're going to click in it, nothing's going to happen. So you're going to go to your Format button. You're going to format the offset account, whether it's a debit or credit, however that is set up. The transaction type, if it is an adjustment, a bank transfer, a check number deposit, or you're just referencing a document reference. This is set up as a deposit. So you'll see here that it asks for the deposit number. If I say that this is a check number, then it's going to remove that field, but then you can get that information entered in. So obviously you wouldn't, for a cash receipt, it knows that it should not be a check number. So, so when you go through and you get this set up, at this point, you're going to go in and just go to your Lines tab and put in the applicable information, whatever account it's going to, because you know it's going to offset the other account. And then at that point, you have done your entry. It can be as many line items as it needs to be. So it's going to debit this 1200 account, and then it's going to credit this 530 account. So again, I'm not using a great example of it hitting your cash account and so forth, but I did want to just show you how that is set up so that you know what you can do to actually get entries to hit the bank rec. That question comes up a lot. There's a lot of frustrations with clients because they do the general journal entry all of the time, and they're like, why can't I get this to integrate with bank rec? So I just wanted to make you aware of the difference between the two. So again, the transaction journal entry is for entries such as cash disbursements, bank transfers, cash receipts. As I mentioned in the example earlier, maybe you have an industry-specific billing software, but you need to enter the cash receipts into your general ledger when those come in. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you need assistance setting up a transaction journal entry, making sure that you have the offsets correct, you just kind of want to run through that whole process, please feel free to get with our support team, and they will be glad to walk you through that process. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about, and we get questions quite often about setting up allocations. And allocations basically are ways to allocate expenses to various GL account numbers. So an example of this, and we're going to walk through this process, but for those of you that use AP, you should be aware, and if you're not, we can show you how this works, but in accounts payable, there are distribution tables now. So you could set up distribution tables and assign them per vendor, so that when you are entering an invoice for a vendor, it populates that distribution table that you're going to use, so that you don't have to do so many line entries on that invoice data entry. The allocation, if you use allocation entry, you may not need to use those distribution tables at all. So an allocation would be, let's say for an example, your utility bill. When you get your utility bill in, your AP person types in and just codes that directly to the main utility account. But you can set up an allocation that says, you know, if something hits that GL account number associated with the allocation, I want that allocation broken down a certain way. So an allocation entry, and I'm just going to grab one right here that's already set up. So the allocation number is just a number that's randomly assigned. You're going to give it a description. You're going to give it your source account. So this would be like your main account that, like none of your sub accounts, but your main utility account. So this would be when your AP clerk is entering in that utility invoice, this is the general ledger number that they're using. It's going to ask what allocation method you want. Do you want it based on a percentage? Do you want it based on quantity? Or do you want it based on basis? And the basis, if we say basis, okay, I'm just going to say yes. And then this is based on your budget. So if you set up budgets in Sage 100, you can allocate based on budgets. Most people do it based on percentage, and they just break it out amongst their departments. You can say what type of allocation cycle it is. Most people will do this at the end of a period. So once your AP person has all of their entries in, or GL, whoever's doing entries, has all of their entries completed for April, then you would go in and then you would run those allocations. So you're going to tell it what allocation cycle, and then on the lines tab, this is where you're going to break out how anything posted to this account number, is allocated. And you'll notice here that it says percent and ties in right here. So you're just going to fill in. So think of it just kind of as a template. And let's say this department is a large department and they get allocated 50% of the utilities. And this one gets allocated 10. Now you'll notice it's tracking my percentage down here. So let's say this one gets 25%, this one gets 10%, and I have no other account number, so I either need to add an account number or I need to modify this. So let's just make this one 15% so that it totals Let me go back and do that because the decimal place didn't hit the right spot. Okay, so that you have your allocation set up, you're going to click accept. And then at the end of the period or at whatever point you are ready to, start working on your financials and getting everything done for the GL for the end of the month, you're going to go into period and processing, and you're going to go into allocation selection. And it's going to tell you allocations for what fiscal year, what period ending, and what posting date do you want it to be. What financial allocations or non-allocations you want to do. So based on your criteria listed here, you're going to click proceed. And if I have anything that falls into that category, it brings up my selection. So it's showing me the different allocations that fall into that period. It's going to show me what the total posting is going to be. And I said that I wanted the allocation journal to be AJ. That was how it was identified with the source code. And so I can go ahead and click and accept this. And then I can, bear with me just a second, then I can go ahead and either print my allocation journal from here. If I exit out of here, then I can go to my allocation journal. It's basically going to print the information, and we're going to look at it in just a second, and then you're going to update it. If you notice, so let's say that I run the allocation and I realize that it's incorrect, or I ran it for the wrong period, or I ran it for the wrong posting date, or something of that nature. There's a clear button down here. So if I want to clear this entire allocation out, I can just click my clear button. Do I want to clear selected allocations? I'm going to say yes. And basically it clears that selection. I can go back in to my selection. Let's say that I wanted to do this as of the last business day of the month versus a Saturday. So I would change my information. I'm going to click proceed. It is going to then bring up everything that falls into that selection criteria. It's going to show me the posting date. And again, I can either click here to print the allocation journal, or I can close out of here. I can just accept this, and I can then manually go over to this journal. I'm going to tell it to do full comments, and we're going to preview that allocation journal. And you're going to see that on this particular utility invoice that was for $3147.60, it broke it out by the proper percentage, and you can see how it's broken it out and allocated it to various departments. Okay. So there's one question out there, it looks like, Jody. I'll see if that's something that I can address or if I need to follow up after. And then I'd like to know if anybody has any questions about this allocation journal. Now, when I exit out of here, like anything else, it's going to say, do I want to update it? I'm going to say yes. And that's where it's going to make those entries. And it has now allocated those expenses. So Jody, I'll open it up to if anybody has a question about allocations and the question that's already out there.
So the question that's already out there has to do with a transaction journal entry for bank transfer between two bank accounts. Is that possible?
That's a good question, and I believe that the answer to that is yes. Let me, if you will make, oh, go ahead.
I'll back you up on that. I'm also pretty sure that the answer is yes, but off the top of my head, I don't remember how to do it.
Well, I'm kind of in the same boat, and I'll apologize up for that. But if you will make a note of who that is, I will follow up with them on how that is done. It hasn't been a feature that has been around forever related to the general ledger. and or bank rec. But I do know that, gosh, and I don't remember what version it became available and it was added, but I think it's been there for a while, where you can do those transfers between one bank and another. So let's say that you're processing your payroll or something of that nature, and you need to transfer money out of your main bank account to your payroll account, where you can do that. So if you'll make a note of that, Jody, I will certainly follow up after the session. And I don't know if I'll be able to go back and determine exactly what version it became an option. But if you're running a supported version, it should be available to you. So thank you for that question, Jody. Does anyone in the group have any questions about allocations? If they do, please go ahead and enter those in. Another thing that we're going to talk about, and we're not going to get into a lot of detail, but I want to be aware that you can do it. That Sage has a budget feature where you can set up budgets within Sage, and there's various ways you can base your budget on. You know, I want to base my budget on what my actual was for 2020, or I want to base it on what the actual was and bump it up a certain percentage. But you can manage your budgets within Sage. Now, it is not a robust budget and planning software such as Adaptive. It's pretty basic, but where it will track your current budget. Maybe you can look at last year's budget, this year's budget, what revisions have been made, but you can go through and set that up. And with that being said, I'm going to move down to the utilities for just a second and tell you about the General Ledger Exchange. The GL Exchange is a feature that's built into Sage 100, and it allows you to import or export information out of the General Ledger. Now, it is very specific on how your data has to look, and it can prevent some challenges, especially related to importing into the budget. So what our team recommends is that usually, if you have the Visual Integrator module, it is usually much easier to create a VI job to do an import into your budget or something like that, because you have much more flexibility. With GL Exchange, it's like, if the field is this, it has to equal that. It's very rigid and not very user-friendly. So most of the time, we will use a Visual Integrator import to assist to import those budgets in. But just be aware that you do have the ability to track budgets within the General Ledger module in Sage. But if you do have need for advanced budget and planning, please get in touch with Jody, and she will be glad to let you know what products we offer based on your need and make recommendations to you. We do have some very robust budget and planning software options that our clients use. So I just kind of wanted to make you aware of that. Okay. Another question that we get, and I know we're not near year end yet, but maybe you're approaching your fiscal year end, is that we do recommend for all of the modules, and kind of I'm going to do a little exception here with the GL, we do recommend that well, bear with me. Oh, okay. We do recommend that you do period end processing in your subsidiary modules on a monthly basis. That way you're preventing people from posting to prior periods. You also can set up in your security that they can't post to future periods, or they can't post maybe to more than 1 or 2 future periods. Think about if it's May the 2nd and you're still getting invoices, AP invoices in dated April 25th, but at the same time you're getting May invoices. Well, you want to make sure that your April invoices are hitting your April expenses and the GL in the proper period, and then at the same time, then you're going to have a separate batch for your May invoices and posting those. So it's very it's important to be consistent with doing that period end processing in each of your modules, and at the end of the year, when you've done all your data entry and everything is done, closing those modules. Now, with that being said, you can leave the GL open, and most people do because you're going to go through an audit. You've got to send your paperwork to your accountant, and they're going to have correcting entries that you need to make. So you can keep that general ledger open and make those entries. But once you have those final entries in, then you should do the year-end processing in the general ledger as well. So, and it's going to know when you go into period end processing whether you're closing a period, or it knows what your fiscal year is, and if it recognizes that it is the 12th or in some cases 13th period of the year, and it's your year end or fiscal year end, it's going to know then that you're not doing, quote, period end processing, but you're doing year end processing. And what happens when you do that processing, I'm going to go back to my GL options here for just a second. If it's a period that we're closing, if we closed period 5, then it's going to automatically then move this and make it period 6. So with that being said, you can go in and reopen the general ledger if you need to. So let's say that you've got all your adjusting entries in, you've got all of your reports run, everything balances, everything's good. You close the GL year, and then a week later, your accountant comes back and said, oh, I'm sorry, we missed something. We need for you to make this entry in 2020 as well. What you can do is you can go into your GL options. You can reset the period. So if this said 6, you would reset it back to 5, and I'll just set it back to 4. I would accept this. I'm going to do my adjusting entries that I need to do, run my reports, make sure everything balances, and then I'm going to come in here and then change this back. Excuse me. So it is possible to reopen a period, make entries. We don't recommend that you go back and forth and do it a lot. Make sure that you feel very comfortable before you do period end or year end, but you should not, do it 5 times within a month because somebody keeps forgetting to post AP invoices, or they find they have a whole bunch from last month that they forgot to enter. Then you need to be addressing any kind of staffing issue that you might have, but you are able to do this. If you are hesitant about doing it and you want to make sure that it's okay, feel free to contact our support team, and they will be glad to walk you through that process. You can do it in the other modules if absolutely necessary, but we prefer that you don't. Now, on the older versions, if you by any chance are on a really old version of Sage, and if you are, you need to get in touch with us so we can get you upgraded. But if you are on these really old versions, that period end processing is what would calculate reports like your history buckets of your period to date and your year to date information. So if you're going back and you're not closing them properly, or the other thing you don't want to do is, if you're ready to close, let's say period 5, in General Ledger. You do not want to come in and just change this to period 6. That is not the proper way to do it. You want to go through the actual period in processing where you're closing it, because again, it's tracking that history properly, and it's not going to do it if you just go in and change it. So I guess what I'm trying to say, and I'm kind of stammering about this, is when it's a regular closing that you need to do it the proper way through period in processing. If you have closed and you realize there's entries that you failed to make, it is okay to go in and into the setup, change your period back, accept it, do your entries, and then when you're done, immediately go back in and change this to the proper period. You do not want to go through the period in processing again. And it could be, and also keep in mind that this period in processing in all of your modules is what dictates when history is purged as well. So in some of the modules, you know, maybe you're keeping something, for instance, in the General Ledger, you know, it was set to keep the history for 2 years instead of 7. Once you do that period in processing, it's going to purge that information out. Okay, so thank you for that. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about a little bit, we talked about under the utilities that you have the GL exchange, but you also can delete GL accounts, you can change GL accounts, you can recalculate account balances, you can generate accounts, you can also purge General Ledger history. Before you do any type of changing that affects your General Ledger, you want to make sure that you have a good backup, and you should have a good backup of everything, not just your GL files, but your entire Sage, which on your server, all of your data is stored within a mass 90 folder. The reason that you want to do this is, let's say that you accidentally deleted a bunch of accounts you didn't mean to, or you merged some accounts, you made some changes, and that really wasn't what you intended to do. You can't unmerge them or unpurge them. So you can't unpurge your history. So what you would have to do is you would have to restore from a backup. And the reason I said you want to do everything is, while you're doing this, trying to change some accounts receivable, and your warehouse may be posting sales order invoices and doing cash receipts. And so they're updating what's in their module, but you know, when you do that daily transaction register, that hits the GL. So chances are, depending on what you do, you may have to restore everything. So I would just suggest be very careful when you do this. Make sure you have a good backup. Once you have the changes made, then go through and make sure everything looks okay before you move forward with additional processing. So that kind of talks about and covers what we wanted to talk about with the General Ledger today. So if you have any questions about this, please let us know. I know that we get a lot of questions, especially with new implementations, just trying to understand the Sage 100 GL in general, managing the chart of accounts, how to set up the definition of what a main account is versus what a sub account is. You may also, we will get calls where people are like, you know, we've just bought another company, and we're going to bring them into our existing Sage 100 company as a new division. So we're wanting to create GL account numbers for them. You know, how can we easily do this? Or you know, we've decided we want to restructure our chart of accounts. We have several clients a year that will decide for whatever reason how it was set up in the beginning just isn't working for them any longer, with the way their business has grown and so forth, what their reporting needs are. So they're wanting to restructure their chart of accounts. Please, I would encourage you to talk with one of our consultants about that, so they can share with you any pros or cons about doing that restructure, the things that you want to make sure that you watch for, and to make that as seamless as possible, so that you're not in a bad situation having to restore and then give us a call to figure out what you need to do. So we certainly are available to help you with any of that. The other thing that I will add and throw out here for Jody is, in the General Ledger, you have some canned financial reports that are already in the system. You can also create some custom financials using a wizard within these financial reports. And but some individuals and some clients have a need for a much more robust financial statement. Maybe they need to do consolidated statements and things of that nature. And we have, there are products and solutions available to do that. Some of our clients use Biz Insights, which is we also call BizNet, to do their custom financial statements. Also with Sage 100, with the current versions and with your subscription, you automatically get a product called Sage Intelligence. And Sage Intelligence is also a tool and a software that allows you to do custom financial statements and manage those. BizNet is Excel-based. And Jody, I believe, isn't Sage Intelligence Excel-based also?
Yes, it is. Actually, the reports are set up and run and saved as templates from inside of Sage 100. But when you run the report, instead of it opening up in like a crystal report window like the standard financials do, it actually opens up into an Excel document, so that you've got all of the flexibility and other formulas that you can report on using native Excel functionality.
So if you have an interest in learning more about Sage Intelligence or BizNet, please get in touch with Jody, and it's Jody Patterson, and her email address is jody@oasisky.com, and she will be glad to either answer your questions about what's included with Sage, what's not included, pricing on BizNet if you're interested in that, or passing you along to a consultant if it's a more technical type question. So I did want to make everyone aware that there are options if you are finding that you have an additional need for custom financials, and you don't have to just have a separate Excel sheet outside of Sage, but you can still use your Excel skills with Sage Intelligence or BizNet. So I did want to make sure that everyone was aware of that. So that concludes our presentation for today. So again, if you have any questions that you think of after this session, you can feel free to email me. My email address is pam@oasisky.com, and I will be glad to get those questions answered for you. And then the bank transfer question, I'll get that information from Jody, and I will be sure and follow up with you. I just want to let you know that our next webinar is on Wednesday, May the 12th. And that webinar, we're going to be covering accounts payable and bank reconciliation. Looks like something popped up in the question, Jody.
Yeah, we do have someone who is interested in apparently learning more about Sage Intelligence reporting or BizNet for financial reporting. We do have videos available on both of those out on YouTube, and there are some on our website at oasisky.com. Under the Learn option, there is a section called Videos, so you can drill out to that. and they're filed under business intelligence. I will follow up with the person that specifically asked that afterwards to send you some links to that. And we have another question. I'm using custom reports in the general ledger for our financials. Is this going away in the future?
Are they talking about the old custom financials?
That's the way that I'm reading it. Deborah, if you can clarify your question.
Yeah, I think let me see if I can do this.
I think the answer is yes, they've already gone away. Is that not right?
No, they have not. You have to unhide them. You have to unhide them and add it to the menu. Let's see, which I'm not seeing here. And it may be, I may have to exit Sage and go back in order for it to come up. It is, to the best of our knowledge, it has not gone away, and they have not said that it is going to go away. Honestly, I don't know how long that they will keep doing that, but it has not gone away yet. When you do, if you're using those, what I call the old custom financials, when you do an upgrade, they're not going to show up on your menu. The consultants, the PM that's doing the upgrade has to run a utility. And as you just saw, it was you go under File Run, and it's asterisk unhide GL, and that adds it back to your menu. So as of today, it is still an option. We don't have many people that use it anymore because it is kind of clunky. But we have others that have used it for the past 25 years and want to keep using it because that's what they're comfortable with. The new version of Sage, the 2021 version, is probably going to be released sometime next week or the following week. And I'm attending a webinar next week that talks about the what's new, but we have not heard any chatter, or I haven't heard any chatter that that's going to go away.
I would encourage, if you're still using that old custom reports feature for your financial reports, I strongly encourage you to take a look at Sage Intelligence Reporting. As Pam mentioned, you do have one report manager user, as well as the designer module is included with all Sage 100 subscriptions. So you may just need to have it installed. And I'll see if we can send out some links, maybe with the follow-up emails to the attendees, especially the ones that have questions about that.
Okay, great. Anything else, Jody, that we need to address?
I don't see any other questions at this time.
Okay, all right. Well, we will certainly follow up with everyone related to Sage Intelligence and the other, bank transfer question, excuse me. So we certainly will follow up with everyone on that. So I would like to thank you for attending today. Again, you will be receiving a follow-up email probably within the next couple of days, and it will have a link to the recording. So you can watch this again if you want to. Feel free to share it with a coworker if you want them to see it. And again, as Jody said, we will be following up with each of you that wanted more information about Sage Intelligence or any other matter. So thank you all for attending. We're going to go ahead and end the webinar. So thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.